All right. Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Very happy to have you join our EB-5 webinar today. My name is Michael Kaufman. I am the director of EB-5 at the LCP group. And LCP, over the last 50 years, has invested in a number of different types of real estate assets. As of today, we have around $1 billion of assets under management. And in terms of the EB-5 space, we've been in the field for over a decade, 12 years actually. And with this webinar, I'll be introducing not only LCP and our track record, but the EB-5 process, current topics that are pretty important for you to know in EB-5, and also excited to introduce our two projects that we currently have on the market. And finally, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. We'll be covering that at the end of the webinar. And before I begin, I'd like to introduce one of the top immigration attorneys in the United States. Very happy to have him join. Paul, welcome to the webinar.
Hello, and thank you so much, Michael, and LCP Group for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Chen, and I'm a senior partner at Meyer Law Group, and we have over 15 years of experience in the EB-5 industry. And I've basically dedicated my career to provide expert legal services to investors seeking U.S. residency through the EB-5 program. And I'm honored. Recently, I've been recognized by my peers as one of the top 25 EB-5 attorneys. Our firm, Meyer Law Group, we have filed over 2,000 I-526 petitions, achieving a rate of basically 100%. So happy to be here.
That's amazing, Paul. Yeah, so not only does Paul often get recognition for his superior work, but his partner, Brandon Meyer, the namesake of the Meyer Law Group, also is constantly recognized as one of the top immigration attorneys as well. So it's a great team and very happy to have him join. To begin with, just want to talk a little bit more about the LCP's track record when it comes to EB-5. Over the last 12 years, completed 17 EB-5 projects, raising over $550 million from over 1,100 investors. And this is before COVID, so the investment amount was $500,000 per investment. And these 1,100 investors are coming from over 30 countries. So we understand where you're coming from, maybe any issues you may have getting your capital out of the country. But not only working with us, working with the right immigration attorney, such as Paul and his team, will help you get through the entire process. Also happy to just inform everybody that for those 17 projects, we have 100% USCIS project approval. Used to be called exemplar approval. Our two current projects, which are projects number 18 and 19, also have the I-956F approval from USCIS. So we just make sure that everything goes according to plan when it comes to the EB-5 industry. Finally, of the $550 million raised, we have been able to repay $65 million to our investors. The only reason why that number isn't higher is just because before COVID, when we were very active in EB-5, the majority of those investors came from China. Fortunately, those investors from China had hit a backlog, and so they didn't get far enough along in the EB-5 process in order for us to legally repay them their capital. But every one of our loans that has been distributed to certain projects, it's all been repaid to us. And then we've had to redeploy that capital into other projects. And then Paul and I we could discuss after the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, the sustainment period changed, but we'll get to that in the near future. So some benefits of the EB-5 program. First, permanent residency, opportunity for citizenship. After you get the unconditional green card, 5 years after that, you could actually go through the naturalization process to become a citizen. And when it comes to EB-5, you don't need a sponsor. You don't need some employment, some company to sponsor your petition. There is no minimum education or work experience required. Really, what the government wants to see is your $800,000 investment came from a legal source. After obtaining the green card, you could live and work anywhere in the United States. It does not matter if you work with LCP that's based in New York. You don't have to live in New York. It doesn't matter if you invest with an LCP project For example, one of ours is in Atlanta, Georgia. You don't have to live in Georgia. You can live wherever you want as soon as you get the green card. Also, education benefits. When you move to a certain state, perhaps you have a child, maybe you want to go to school yourself, you can actually qualify for in-state tuition, which is significantly less than out-of-state or an international student would pay. Paul, anything else? Did I miss anything there in terms of some of the overarching benefits of the EB-5 program?
Well, I just want to say that most likely a lot of people are here in the US already, and they're on H-1B or TN or L-1 visas, or some students are on F-1, or parents are visiting on B-2 tourist visas. By filing for EB-5, you can basically be liberated from the work and um, location or geographic requirements of some of those, especially the work visas. So, you don't have to be tied down to the H-1B employer and the prevailing wage issues. You don't have to be tied down to your L-1B employer, and you can work anywhere and have multiple jobs at the same time without filing other cases. So I think that's a big benefit of EB-5.
Right. And actually, on another slide, you and I are going to go a little bit more in depth into the benefits of applying for EB-5 while living in the United States on a different visa.
Right.
But that is for a later slide. So for those who understand the EB-5 process, please bear with us. For those who are new to the program, we're going to go very quickly over how it works. But in a nutshell, this is the step-by-step process for you. So first and foremost, it's essential that you retain an experienced immigration attorney, again, such as Paul and his team at the Meyer Law Group. These individuals are going to be working with you from day one to compiling all of your source of funds documentation when you file that first petition called the I-526E through you obtaining your unconditional green card, however long that takes, potentially up to 5 years for the unconditional green card. But first and foremost, speak with the immigration attorney, make sure it's the right path for you, and then retain that attorney to begin the process. They'll also help you look through all the project documents. So that's something else to consider. Next step, should you choose to work with us at LCP and you think one of our projects is the right fit for you, it will be completed. We'll make sure you not only get your green card because of the capital being at risk, but the jobs that are necessary, 10 jobs per investor, will be completed. We'll also be able to repay your capital if you feel confident. It's a very simple system or setup to begin with. First and foremost, you have to complete a subscription booklet. It's basically know your client, basic information about you, and that you understand of the type of investment that you are getting into. Photo page of your passport, as well as the Form W-8 BEN. Very simple, straightforward process. The next step would be to wire the $800,000 investment capital, as well as the admin fee, into a third-party escrow bank account. And those funds cannot be touched until you start the EB-5 process. So until you file that I-526E petition, your capital will sit in the escrow bank account. We understand that some investors may have difficulty either getting their capital out of their current country, or perhaps just the financial situation doesn't allow you to invest everything up front. While that's simpler, we have made it acceptable. We do have the ability to accept a partial wire to begin with, and this is on a case-by-case basis. So to begin with, we would expect a $250,000 minimum wire, and then over the next 120 days, receiving the remaining balance of $550,000. So you wired your capital into the escrow bank account. The escrow bank will send us a notification. They receive that capital. We'll send you that information, you and your attorney, and then you'll include that with your I-526E petition once you submit that. After you submit, the government's going to send you a receipt notice. It's called the I-797C, basically saying we received your first petition and we're going to start reviewing. That notice you would then send to us, you or your attorney would send that to us, and we will send that to the escrow bank account to then release the funds into the project bank account. And so we can now use your capital and to help with the construction of whichever project you invest in. So after you get approved, you will be, if you're living out of the country, you are going to have an interview with the local U.S. consulate or embassy. So that could be up to potentially 2 years, and that's on a very conservative basis. We've seen reports that an I-526E petition can be approved in anywhere between 10 to 12 months, but conservative time frame, 2 years for that to happen. And this is if you're living out of the country, then you would go to that U.S. consulate. After that interview, you're going to hopefully, after getting that approval for I-526E, get the conditional permanent residency or the conditional green card, which lasts for 2 years. And then you, any spouse, any unmarried children under the age of 21 can move to the US wherever you'd like. So it could just be for you, yourself, one investor, and no dependents. It could be for you and a spouse, you and one dependent, or it could be for multiple children, 5 visas in total, 6 visas, whatever your family situation is. Next step, after 21 months of the 24 living in the US, you're going to file Form I-829 to remove the conditions on your conditional permanent residency. So this will allow you to obtain the 10-year unconditional green card. And what the government's checking here is whether or not your capital is at risk and whether or not you, through your investment, help to employ 10 US workers. And that's on us at LCP. We'll show through documentation that your capital was at risk and that you did help create those 10 jobs. And it should be a very straightforward, simple process for that approval. The I-829 stage could also take around 2 years. So while you're living in the US, you don't have to leave because the conditional green card technically has expired. But you will, after 2 years, get that unconditional 10-year green card, which you can renew every 10 years, or, as I mentioned before, you can go after 5 years through the naturalization process to become a US citizen. Paul, anything in particular you like to highlight? I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but anything in particular you want to mention?
No, I think you have it pretty good here. Yeah, we
Okay,
can discuss more details later.
sure. In terms of costs, an EB-5 investment, doesn't matter if it's just for you, one investor, or if you have 5 dependents, it's one $800,000 investment. We do have an administrative fee of $80,000 that goes to LCP. Immigration attorney fees, technically, they usually range from $25,000 to $30,000. And this is for the entire EB-5 process. From day one, they're going to help you review the project documents. They're going to help you assemble the source of funds documentation, all the way through you obtaining your unconditional 10-year green card. Next, filing with USCIS, there are some fees. I say in general, it's just around $25,000 for the I-526E petition, just over $12,000, I-829 petition, $9,500, and then the adjustment of status. And Paul, can you just talk a little bit more about the adjustment of status and how that works?
Yeah, basically, adjustment of status only works when the investor and the investor's spouse and children under 21 years old are in the United States. So the opposite of adjustment of status is called consular processing. This is for those who stay outside the US during the pending I-526 petition. But for adjustment of status, if you are in the United States, so a perfect example would be someone who's on H-1B or a student, right? Someone who's studying at NYU or Columbia, and you're a student and you want to adjust status. So when you file the EB-5 case, you can concurrently adjust status. The forms that you would file are the I-485, which is for the conditional green card, and the I-765, which is for the work permit. We also call that the EAD, or Employment Authorization Document. And then the last form is the I-131, which we call travel document, or also known as advanced parole. So what's great about filing adjustment of status is that in about 2 to 3 months after filing, you can get the EAD card, the work permit, and typically within 4 to 6 months, you can get the advanced parole. Then you can work and travel anywhere in the US. You can travel outside the US, even up to a year, even up to 2 years at a time. The work permit will be good for 5 years. The travel document will be good for 5 years. But hopefully you don't need all 5 years. Um, yeah, so this amazing benefits. It wasn't in existence before the 2022 RIA Act. And for Indians and Chinese, this really does not exist in any of the other employment-based opportunities.
Right. So they effectively have all the benefits of the green card without obtaining the green card yet.
Right.
Right. Now, moving on to what we've been seeing in the EB-5 space, the chart on the left, a little out of date, but what I wanted to highlight here is the yellow bars you see are the high unemployment filings, and the green below, those are for rural project filings. And so 2023 through the beginning of 2024, high unemployment was by far and large the more popular choice for investments. But before 2023, nobody really did a rural project. Before the RIA in 2022, that's the Reform and Integrity Act, that adjusted the investment amount to $800,000 and allowed for concurrent filing that Paul just mentioned. But nobody really selected a rural project just because, in terms of success, it's a little bit more difficult to ascertain whether or not a rural project would be successful. But after the RIA, there was something called the set-asides. And Paul, can you just briefly discuss what these set-asides were about in terms of how many visas annually are through EB-5 and why are there set-asides? What's going on there?
Yeah, so the set aside is something that was created by law under the Reform and Integrity Act. Basically, our US Congress felt like a lot of the projects we needed to focus on high unemployment areas and set a certain number of visa quota for that set aside, and then also for a rural set aside, right? And then also for infrastructure. There, right now for infrastructure projects, I don't really see any infrastructure projects out there. Um, and in the beginning, there were uh, more high unemployment set aside projects. And then now there's quite a number of rural projects. Um,
I would say more
but
rural projects now than high unemployment
yeah, there's definitely
from what I've
more.
seen. Yeah.
There's definitely more. And by logic, that makes sense because you can see on the visa bulletin, there's this little 20% and then 10% and 2%. It just means it's kind of like the H-1B cap quota. There's a certain percent or 20,000 H-1B visas that are designated for US masters. It's kind of like that. There's going to be 20% out of the 10,000 annual visas that are definitely going to be set aside for rural projects, right? And then there's 10%, so that's 1,000 definitely set aside for high unemployment. So what we saw back in 2023 and the beginning of 2024 were that the fact that there were basically mostly there were high unemployment projects, and most of the people were applying in those areas. But I feel like in the last year, that has basically inversed. So now I would say out of 10 cases that I file, probably 8 out of 10 are filing with rural projects, and only 20 2 out of 10 are filing with high unemployment. So I think there will be an adjustment in the future where high unemployment, it may be uh, almost at par, almost even with rural. So it may be worth looking into high unemployment projects as well.
Right, just because when we're talking about backlogs, it's, there are so many rural projects because of the 2,000 visas that are set aside. So it's not as high a chance for people from 2023 into 2024 and now into 2025, just potentially less of a chance of them hitting that backlog, right? So they can kind of cut the line.
Yeah,
But like what you're saying and what, we go to the conferences, we see the types of projects out there and speaking to other immigration attorneys, what they're seeing in terms of filings, I think it's even more extreme just from what I've heard in
yeah,
terms of the number of filings, from where you see 331, 2024. I think it's even more in favor of rural. Like you mentioned, it's probably more 80%, if not higher, for
if not
rural
higher.
projects,
Yeah,
especially from Indian and Chinese born investors, because that's by far and large the two largest markets.
right.
Um, you know,
Yeah, I would just kind of think of it as the competition. Like if you look at EB2 versus EB3, um, EB2 was always faster in the past, for Indian and for Chinese. So everyone wanted to apply for EB2, right? And then people started realizing, oh, well, EB3 became faster. So everyone started applying for EB3 and downgrading their EB2 down to EB3, right? And there were times where EB3 was actually slower, right? So I think we're going to see a little bit of that. I think that the high unemployment quota will be potentially more available in the next year.
yeah, that's one thing I wanted to mention is that I've been speaking with a lot of potential EB-5 investors who are living in the United States and they filed for their EB-2 or EB-3. And as you can see, many of those investors happen to be born in India. And so 2013 is the final action date. And for investors who are not so familiar with final action dates, can you just explain what that means? If you're seeing for India, let's say, in the EB in the second or third category, Jan 1 or April 1, 2013, what does that mean?
Yeah, it just means when the perm or labor certification form. So there's a lot of these acronyms in immigration, but it's basically when the ETA 9089 labor certification form was filed with the Department of Labor. That's the date. That's the priority date. Assuming eventually the I-140 immigrant petition is also approved connected to that perm case. So if your priority date is, let's say, January 1st, yeah, January 1st, 2013, and it's a EB2 category, then that means that you can not only file for adjustment of status, but if you had previously filed for adjustment of status, then your green card could be approved this month or next month, right? In April, it could be. Um, and if
12
you
years.
correct, actually, it's way more than 12 years. Um, those dates move up, they move down. They never move like in a correlation of one day to one day.
Mm.
It's like 1 to 3 days. So I think if your priority day is something like 2020, so mathematically that's 7 years, but it's gonna end up being more like 20 to 25 years in terms of waiting. So you've already
Uh,
suffered through the
yeah,
HCAP
that's rough.
lottery.
That's why so many are starting to
Yeah.
call and look into EB-5 for this exact reason.
Yeah. Like even
Yeah.
if I have clients that have a 2015 priority day and seemingly it's only 2 years away. But that's because, I mean, that means they have been waiting in this system for over 10 years already, and they do not believe it's only 2 years away. They know how it works. It's really
Right.
more like 8 to 9 years away. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
So let's move on to the C that they could see in the chart right here.
Yeah,
Uh,
so if you go on India or China, you move down the column down to the last three columns, I mean the last three rows. It has all these beautiful C's. C just means current. It means that if you had applied and everything's ready, you could get your green card today, right? Or this month. Or if you're in the US, then under the RIA Act, you can file concurrent filing and you can get the work permit and the travel document. So the C is very important. So look at
C
all
for
those,
current for everybody.
yes, look at all those beautiful current boxes.
But
Um,
that could change, right? There's
yeah,
been
it could
whispers and
change.
rumors saying that at some point this year, especially for China and India, those two countries, that those Cs unfortunately can now have certain dates applied to them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it could definitely change. And because of certain immigration policies that are out there, the H-1B, factor, Trump and his sometimes his unpredictability. I've definitely seen an increase in filings and interest in the last month. Um, I was actually in China this month for 2 weeks, and the interest there is amazing. It's just crazy right now. Um, I think it's
Right.
going to be probably 4 or 5 times more than what we did last year. And then for the Indian cases, definitely the increase for me has doubled, if
Mm.
not tripled. Um, yeah, there's only a certain number. I think some of the recent data said there's maybe like 7,000 reserved, set aside uh, visas available for fiscal year 2025. Um, so at some point that will run out.
Right.
We
And if
we
it
don't
does
know
run out,
exactly when. Yeah,
yeah. So I just wanted to also stress for those who are calling in from the US and they're thinking about filing concurrently and now they're learning about the EAD and advanced parole. What happens if we do reach, even for the set asides, a
yeah.
backlog? We reach that
So
retrogression.
so what happens is basically it's good. They have the work permit, they have the travel document. They can always renew that indefinitely, but they just basically the priority date will retrogress. Um, so those that are in the U.S. that have priority dates, you know what that means. It will retrogress. Basically, that letter C, it will become an actual date, like um, January 1st, 2023, or something like that, right? So it could retrogress, and basically now you have to play the waiting game, and there's backlog and everything. You will not be able to get the conditional green card. However, I still think that EB-5 is still the best program, because, you know, at least for the next year or two, everybody's within the first 10,000 of that year. You know what I mean? Like you're still, it's not like filing EB-3, there's, 50,000 people ahead of you, you know.
Right.
In
Right.
EB-5, you're still part of the first group um, for that fiscal year.
And
You just
then
have to wait.
investors,
You have to
oh,
wait
sorry.
maybe another year or two on the back end.
Yeah. And I just wanted to stress for anyone calling who wasn't born in those two countries, China or India, we are not even close to reaching any form of backlog, any retrogression.
Correct.
So you will remain in the C, the current category, and you will not have to, and if unfortunately we reach that for China and India, potentially wait longer than those 2 years to obtain your green card. All right, I want to move on to a couple other trending topics here. So first is the Batineni versus Mayorkas case. And this had to do with the source of funds documentation, as I mentioned before, with the I-526E that you're going to submit to start the entire EB-5 process. The government's checking two things. One, is the project you're investing in EB-5 compliant with LCP and our offerings? Both have already been approved, I-956F. The second is they're going to make sure that your capital, the $800,000, is from legal sources. So the source of funds documentation previously could have gone back many years. If you sold an investment property, where you get the money to buy that property, uh, it could go back and you could have the accumulation of a lot of paperwork. And so Batineni versus Mayorkas was to hopefully limit how far back you'd have to go. And Paul, have you seen on your end, are you filing the same exact way? Because we're not so sure about this case, whether or not you don't have to go too far back, or have you adjusted your process?
Well, this case just came out, I think, in December of 2024.
Hmm.
So Michael did a good job of summarizing the key issues. I'll just kind of repeat some of the issues again. This was a case where two investors, I think Prakash and Rakesh Bettineni, um, they filed the I-526. They have provided a completely lawful source of funds, and then they made the investment into a viable regional center project. The USCIS denied the case just basically because they couldn't trace every single dollar, right? Every single penny that was basically moved around after liquidating one of their sources of funds, because as many people do, they move funds into higher interest bearing accounts or CDs, or they'll put it into a mutual fund for a little bit. And the USCIS at that time was saying, we're missing $1, we're going to deny the case. So Bettinini, the federal court ruling basically said, no, like, we're not doing that. We're not. The case is about, let's focus on lawful sources of funds. Let's focus on just making sure there's no money laundering issues, there's no criminal activity. Let's come back to the original purpose of the whole point about lawful source of funds. And let's not focus too much in detail on the path of funds or how money is wired and transferred. Of course, we're not, as attorneys, we're not going to go around and basically say, oh, let's just let the money come from a totally different source at the very end. But yeah, we're not really changing anything on our side, because for us, we have already been basically following the Bettinini, ideals, I guess, or opinion already. We're focusing on the source of funds and also doing our best on the path of funds. And honestly, most of our clients are not going to have this kind of issue. If you had been working in the U.S. for the last 10 years, all your tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs, 401ks, stock options, RSUs, all of that there should be no question about that at any rate. So yeah, I'm not worried about this new ruling, and actually it's actually very favorable to the investors.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. And this is all to benefit you, the investor. Thanks for that, Paul. Now, moving on to the latest craze in terms of what everyone's talking about when it comes to EB-5. About a month ago, February 25th, in the Oval Office, President Trump came out and mentioned the gold visa, saying it was going to replace EB-5, $5 million investment. It was going to pay off government debt. And he was just drilling on and on. There's so many scams in EB-5. That hasn't been the case. There were some mishaps many years ago, but there's been a lot more oversight from USCIS in terms of the regional centers and every project. But I've seen personally, I'd like to know what you've seen over the last month. I've seen two groups emerge from people I've been speaking to in terms of investors. The smaller group has been very hesitant. They don't know if the program is going to continue. They don't know if they're going to invest and then they're going to lose their money and they won't get the green card. But the other, much larger group has taken this as a catalyst. You know, they've been thinking about EB-5. Now they understand they will be grandfathered into existing conditions in EB-5 in terms of the investment amount and how long it would take them to get their actual green card. So they actually use that announcement to just move forward and invest. That's what we've seen. And Paul, I'd just like to get your viewpoint on the gold visa. What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to replace EB-5? Is it going to run like at the same time as EB-5? Or, will Trump make sure, does he have the power to do anything when it comes to EB-5?
Yeah, this is a really interesting issue because it really tests, Trump's like, what is he doing, right? And it really challenges the potential investor, the potential EB-5 investor, to really make a decision. Um, I was on the plane literally flying to Asia, to China, when Trump made that announcement. And so I thought I was gonna have a nice flight. And when I landed, I think either Hong Kong or something, there were like 300 text messages on my phone. And I was like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, basically Trump announced that he wants to have this $5 million gold card. Um, I mean, I'm totally not surprised by this. Trump wants to sell America, you know. He believes highly in the marketability of America. You just have to get into his mind a little bit. Everything's a business deal, whether he's a good businessman or not. It's not whatever. I don't know, but everything's a deal for him. So if he wants to sell a little piece of America, then that's his idea, right? Okay, so that probably would have been fine if he just wanted to do that. But then him and I think one of his secretaries said, "Well, let's replace EB-5." Um,
Hmm.
okay, so that's the problem,
Lutnick,
right? Yeah, Ludnick,
right? Hmm.
and I think he doubled down on it on another recent podcast. Um, and so basically, I think that it has increased the interest in EB-5 because I think there are tens of thousands of investors and families out there that have been considering EB-5. They're ready to go. They maybe just had some questions about their sources of funds. They're working it out. They're selling their properties. They're trying to obtain the HELOC loan or refinance. It's taking some time. And they were thinking maybe this summer we can do it. No, like with this announcement, they're like, okay, we got to do it right now. Um, what I'm seeing are a lot of investors now willing to do partial investments. In the past, you have to you have to invest 800,000, but and most investors want to invest all 800,000 at the same time. But with this announcement, so many investors now are like, what if I just invest 200,000?
Right.
I'll pay the rest in 4 months once I get the loan or whatever. Once the stock market kind of balances out a little bit.
Yeah, this is why we're offering 250,000 just so they could start the process, and then they're set, and they'll complete the 800,000 in the next 4 months or so. But yeah, we understand that they want to get in. They might not have the 800,000, so let's just start the process. Make sure you get
Right,
in,
right.
grandfathered into existing conditions.
I have not personally talked to anyone who saw the Trump announcement and then got so discouraged that they don't want to do it anymore. Everyone I talked to has been saying, okay, I want to know about it and I want to know how to beat this Trump um, projection, right? Or
Right.
speculation. Okay, so going back to the legal side, basically, we don't have a lot of detail about the proposed gold card. And it's actually unclear if the program will actually work in parallel to the EB-5 program or entirely replace it. I highly doubt that because the president cannot unilaterally change the EB-5 program. It's basically the EB-5 is a law. It was set up by Congress, and to repeal it would require an extremely lengthy legislative process, uh, and would likely face a lot of litigation. To repeal EB-5 at a minimum would take months, if not years, and by then Trump's won't even be president. Um, I don't really think um, the gold card will happen uh, in this administration, but I cannot say for sure. It may or may not. Um,
Right.
so,
That's why we're
but I don't
advising
think
everybody.
I don't think it will. Sorry, I don't think it will replace EB-5. But again,
Yeah.
we have to stress that you got to file as soon as possible, especially before September 30th, 2026, when that's the
Right.
grandfathering clause. Um, okay.
The end date. Yeah. If they file October 1st of 2026 and then the program's not extended, they may not get their green card because they're
Right.
not going to be grandfathered in. But
Exactly.
that's still 18 months away. And so just because of the gold card, we are advising everybody, if you are interested and you are thinking about getting into EB-5, to file as soon as possible. Get that initial partial wire in, file the I-526E, and then over the next few months, you'll be able to complete the investment and you're already set.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for your input, Paul, on that one. A lot of people, I mean, that's 4 weeks ago already, and he said it was going to take 2 weeks. He's going to come out with a whole plan. I'm sure there's not going to be a whole plan for another 6 months minimum, but it is what it is. So if you are still considering EB-5 and you have been hesitant just because of what that announcement stated, we would urge you to just start the process sooner than later. So moving on, source of funds, back to the general EB-5. Why it's important to pick the right immigration attorney, especially one who has experience in EB-5, is because of the nuances when it comes to submitting the I-526E and just handling the entire EB-5 process. You want to make sure that you have that attorney who has filed dozens, if not hundreds, of petitions. They understand what USCIS looks for. You don't want to receive the RFE, request for evidence. That means you submitted your I-526E. You didn't provide enough paperwork. The government's going to come back and say, please provide more paperwork. Just get it done on the first shot. If you still are not providing the necessary paperwork, then you'll potentially receive a NOID, notice of intent to deny. So the government does give you opportunities to do the right thing and provide the necessary documentation, but just get it done first go around with the right immigration attorney. And Paul did mention some different types of source of funds. But if you are interested, definitely jump on a call with Paul or any immigration attorney with experience in EB-5, and they'll be able to walk you through the entire source of funds process. So talking more about LCP, what differentiates us from everyone else out there, many regional centers. We do have 50 years in the real estate world in the United States. So we've seen every single, Robert founded the company in 1974. And when it comes to understanding real estate cycles, understanding especially hotels, that's our bread and butter, but we've done a number of multifamily projects. It's important to know that you're working with a team that Doesn't only focus on EB-5. They've done different types of asset classes and understand everything revolving around real estate. Second, we do offer high yield opportunities with economic returns, even in EB-5. Most projects are traditional debt deals. You might get 1% return annually. We do have something that is a little bit more enticing as a common equity opportunity. And we have many investors who choose to invest with us outside of EB-5 because of how happy they are with working with LCP. Finally, alignment of interest, we do invest in a number of projects that we do raise capital for. We do put capital at risk. So it's good to have the team that you're trusting to have some skin in the game. In terms of EB-5 projects that we have completed previously, here's just a set. We have 4 right here. One Wall Street in Manhattan. That was an office building converted to a condo. We did raise $224 million in EB-5 capital. That loan was repaid. Many of those investors received their green cards, and they're going through the process. And 200 East 59th, also in New York. Basically, you could see every one of these projects not only were completed, but all of the EB-5 loans have been repaid back to LCP. And that just proves the success, right? And if these investors had gotten far enough along the EB-5 process, this is pre-RIA, so the sustainment period has changed. Paul, we didn't talk about that actually, but before the RIA in 2022, if the investor did not already receive their conditional green card and did not file their IA-29, we legally were not able to repay them. And so many of those investors pre-RIA came from China, and there was a backlog. And so while we did receive those hundreds of millions of dollars returned to us, we've had to redeploy that capital to keep the capital at risk, and we were not able to repay those investors, unfortunately. In terms of the post, yeah, Paul, you want to just discuss briefly post RIA sustainment period?
Yeah. So the issue here is called, keeping the investment at risk and the sustainment of the investment to be completely at risk. The sustainment period in pre-RIA was basically up to the end of the 2-year conditional green card, whereas which can be very difficult for those who have backlogs, right? But for the post RIA, the sustainment period, right now the minimum is just 2 years. It's not tied to when your case is approved or when you got the green card. It's not tied to any of those kind of dates. But there is also there is a lawsuit out there trying to extend it to 5 years. So
We are not
just know
in
that.
support of that, just so everyone is aware. But there are many regional centers who are in support of the longer sustainment period for obvious reasons. It's inexpensive capital, and they could use that not only for the initial project, potentially for another. But we believe we should be able to repay our investors as soon as possible. And while the sustainment period is now 2 years, when you have a ground up development, new construction, it's unlikely that you'll see capital before 3.5 years. So typically you can expect, no matter where you are in the EB-5 process, your capital return 3.5, 4 years or so. Here we have just a few more projects. We're running out of time. I wanted to make this 1 hour. We're nearly there, so I'm just going to move quickly through some of these other slides. This was a Hotel Melby. This was a common equity deal, not a debt deal. And investors in this project received very large profits. There was a $500,000 investment. They got a check after 3 years for $250,000. So they were very happy. This common equity platform it's very rare. But when you believe in LCP and you believe in the project and our experience, they benefited significantly with a 19% IRR. So we do have one project currently that has the same setup, common equity deal, and with a very high return that we're expecting. We'll get there soon. So one of our projects that we're currently offering is the Hotel Moxie in Atlanta, Georgia. Moxie is a part of the Marriott brand of hotels like the Ritz-Carlton, Le Méridien, Sheraton. The Moxie is one of the newest brands and the fastest growing. In only 10 years, there were 123 of which are in New York. I stayed in one in Athens, Greece. So They're very successful, and that's why not only have they been sprouting up all over the world very quickly, but for our project, Marriott themselves are putting in $1,500,000 in what's called key money. So they want a Marriott hotel in Atlanta. They want a Moxie. So they're putting in $1.5 million. What we did here, LCP provided a senior loan of $33 million as a bridge loan. And what we're going to do is replace that capital with new EB-5 money. And so what that means for you is that you are the first to be repaid. You're effectively the bank. If anything goes wrong, and LCP has to, let's say the developer defaults, LCP assumes control over the hotel, and we either sell, we find a new developer, whatever it is, you are the first to be repaid under any situation. This is a high unemployment area project. I should have updated this. We did have the approval already in January for the I-956F. It says submitted, but we have been approved. And while we are raising capital from 41 EB-5 investors, we only have around 30 slots remaining. After we got the approval in January, as I'm sure you're aware, it's very important to get that. But the floodgates open. A lot of individuals have chosen the Moxie Hotel. Very happy about that. This is going to be a project that has almost 17 jobs per investor. As I mentioned before, the minimum is 10. It's good to have a buffer between where the project sits and what the bare minimum is. So we have 6.8 more than the bare minimum. And because this is a senior debt deal, more traditional, it's a 1% annual return. So $8,000 for the next 4 years before you get your capital returned. This is the location, Georgia. You can see in the map of the US, southeast of the country. In the map of Georgia on the lower right, you can see it's more in the northwest of the state. It is the capital. But the Moxie Hotel is in a great location. What we're trying to do is develop this project and complete it by Q2 of 2026. So about 15 months from now. And while we're trying to open up at that date, the FIFA World Cup is going to be held in the US in Atlanta, summer of 2026. So we're expecting to open the doors and immediately house all these soccer fans from around the world. So we're excited about that. Also, it's around the corner from the country's largest aquarium, across the street from the country's largest convention center, which they're actually expanding because there are so many businesses and trade shows that there's not enough room. And we're a 10-minute walk from the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks Stadium, as well as the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where not only the NFL Atlanta Falcons are playing, but where the FIFA World Cup will be held. So we're going to get leisure tourists, we're going to get sports tourists, we're going to get business tourists, all coming to Atlanta and staying at the Moxie. Construction began July of last year. You can see the progress that was made. As of 2 weeks ago, we are now on the 8th floor out of 10. So we've hit every milestone we set out to achieve. And again, we have another 15 months of construction before we open the doors. Second project is called Fair Lakes, an active adult community. So it's a retirement community, not assisted living. This is right outside of Washington, D.C. Also I-956F approved. 2 existing office towers are going to be gut renovated and turned into luxury apartments for individuals 55 years old and older. It's 20 minutes away from Washington, D.C., and it's a smaller raise, 6.4 million. We do have 3 slots remaining, and construction is set to begin in the next couple months. So what we're looking for is, or what we're providing is not only 70 jobs per investor, so again, 7 times the necessary amount, but a 12% IRR over those 4 years. So basically you invest 800,000. What we're expecting at the end of those 4 years is over a $300,000 return to you as the investor. So Moxie Hotel, traditional, $32,000. Fair Lakes, which we've done this type of project before with Hotel Melby, after 4 years, $300,000 more, so 10 times the profit. Here you can see there are 2 existing structures in the picture on the bottom left, and very close by to DC in Fairfax County, Virginia. Paul, anything else you wanted to mention Everyone, if you want to reach out to Paul, his email, you can see below his profile shot. Anything you want to mention here?
Yeah, I just want everyone to know that I do offer basically a free consultation on source of funds. I mean, probably within 15 minutes we can figure it out. Um, and I'm here to help. Yeah, we had some bullet points, but we've already discussed all of those really. And I mean, we can go into way more detail during the consultation calls. But I just want to, on the very last bullet point, it says F1, H1B, EB-2 versus EB-5. Um, I started out my immigration career working on H1Bs for Qualcomm down in San Diego, and other businesses like Samsung and Adobe Systems. I That was back in 2007. I've seen more EB-5 green cards than from cases filed in 2000 for the Chinese, but also for Indian cases filed in 2016, 17, 18, and even post RIA 2022, 2023. I've seen more green cards getting approved than cases that were filed in 2007.
Hmm.
For EB-2, EB-3, H1B guys. I'm just saying that as an example, as another sort of, this is how our immigration system works. Um, so no, even if there's a backlog, I still think EB-5 is an amazing program to consider. But let's not wait for the backlog. Let's not wait for Trump. Let's not wait until your kids turn 21. Let's just do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul.
Yep.
And we're basically at the tail end of the webinar. Figured I'd look at some questions. So, will there be a quota of 700 per year for a specific country like India for rural infrastructure as well? So I think there was a little misunderstanding in terms of the 700 per year per country and the set-asides potentially. You want to just talk about that briefly? Also, we're fast approaching the hour, so like we'll just handle this question and then if anybody has other questions, I'm always available for a consultation as well as Paul.
Yeah. So the question was so long, I didn't hear it.
Oh, so the question is, will there be a quota of 700 like, visas per year for a country like India for a rural or infrastructure project as well?
Oh no, there's the quota is 1,000 for all of um all of the rural, yeah, 2,000 actually for all of rural, 1,000 for uh high unemployment, right? Yeah, 2,000 for high
Yeah.
unemployment,
Oh,
and what was
2,000
it?
for
Two,
rural, 1,000,
yeah.
1,000 for unemployment. But in terms of the country and the quota of 700, many countries use more, well more, much more than 700, because technically 700 visas per country, but a country like Chile doesn't use 700. They use five. And so a country like China or India will then use the excess or the extra visas for their own filings,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Don't want to go too far over. I think we're at 1 hour right now. Paul, wanted to thank you for joining us this evening and for lending some very important knowledge on the EB-5 process. And I'm sure many individuals will have a lot of questions for you moving forward. But thanks again for joining.
Yeah, happy to be here and to be informative, and so hope I can talk to as many of you that need the help.
Great. Yeah, and for everyone, I will be sending out the recording of this video so you can share it with friends and family. But thank you all for joining, and look forward to continuing the conversation with you soon. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.